everyone, and welcome to Can I Just Say? I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive, and this is our very first episode.
It sure is. I'm very excited.
I'm very excited too. This is a new thing for us. We have been for a year and a half covering Black Sails together on Fathoms Deep, and now we're taking what we did there and going to bring it to lots of other topics.
Yeah, there are so many things that I've wanted to watch with you or share with you, but since you're on the other side of the continent, that's kind of hard to do. But this will give us a space so we can talk about other stories the way that we talked about Black Sails, which is really exciting.
I know, and I'm really excited because we are also going to introduce each other to things we love.
Yeah.
Today's episode is about Master and Commander, which I had never seen.
Inexplicably. Shame on you, Daphne. I mean, no shame, obviously, but...
I know, no shame. But, before Black Sails, I just wasn't that into ships.
That's so interesting. Wow.
Yep.
I'm glad I could bring you along on this ride.
Yes, me too. And so, we're going to do this back and forth to each other. Sometimes we're going to cover stuff that both of us love,
right,
which is how we met. We met through Jane Austen, essentially.
Uh-huh.
And so there's definitely going to be some of that. But I'm actually most excited about these episodes where one of us, like, Black Sails was something we shared a passion for.
Yes.
And so this is going to be really fun to find these places where the things we love intersect.
Yes. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
the things that we love and that we also want to talk about critically. And that's going to be just a really fun ride. So we're going to do also a new format. I wanted to start by reading reviews. And before we read reviews, I just wanted to tell everyone, like, reviews are really important.
They're so important to a new podcast. We cannot stress it enough. Please,
Yes.
please take the time to write a review for us on iTunes. It means so much to help us launch the show and to find our audience.
Yes, absolutely. We're really trying to make this be something that we do for real. Like, we love doing this, and we are hoping that we have a voice in the world of talking about stories and criticism that is worth listening to.
Yes, and frankly, not enough women do. So this is a great chance.
Too.
Yes, this is a great chance to support women in new media. So please help us to do this thing.
Right. Reviews, yes. Reviews help other people find us. When people find us, then they will become our patrons on Patreon, and that is what will allow us to spend less of our time doing our other jobs and ideally doing more of this, because we really like it.
We do.
So yes. So here are our first two reviews, which is so sweet. Thank you to two people who know us from other podcasts who gave us reviews in anticipation of this podcast.
Yes. From Katie B, who calls herself a fan, which makes me very happy. Thank you, Katie. She says, so looking forward to this one. Daphne and Elizabeth and their guests are always so genuine and joyful and just fun to listen to while being really insightful. Can't wait to hear their take on a variety of pop culture topics. And she gave us 5 stars.
Oh,
in anticipation. Katie. Thank you, Katie.
We will do our best to live up to your expectations.
Indeed, yes.
And then our other one is from Parts Bunny, also 5 stars, and said, yet another amazing show from the folks at Common Room Radio. Daphne and Elizabeth are wonderful hosts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that means a lot.
So yes, we are happy, for any reviews, however you all actually feel, although, 5 stars is great. And and we're going to read some each time. I think it's really important for us also to read our reviews, and it'll be a fun thing for the podcast. All right, so let's start talking about Master and Commander, which I did. Now I'm really sad I didn't see it in theater.
Oh, yeah. I actually think that I did see this one in theaters when I was living in Wisconsin. I'm fairly certain that I did. I think I saw this, and apparently Pirates of the Caribbean came out at the same time. Is that right?
Same
These were the 2 ship movies.
I was fascinated by that. Yeah, so those are both the same year. The director is Peter Weir. I started looking at his other films, and 2 of them that I really love are Dead Poets Society and Witness. Right, I know, exactly.
Oh my
I was expecting
God,
you to
and
react
Witness?
that way.
Yes,
yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, no wonder it's so good.
All right, I think we can say that those are both movies we're going to cover on Can I Just Say?
It's certainly possible, yes. Yeah, Dead Poets Society is perfect for this show. Absolutely.
Yes, I think that's something that you and I need to talk about, and we never have.
No. Wow, how have we never talked about that? Yeah.
Right, I know. It's from the book series by Patrick O'Brien. From what I understand, this movie, I've not read those books, and a lot of our current listeners have talked about how much we should read the books.
Yes, and I've often wanted to. Yeah, I've heard that there's a lot of the nautical terminology and jargon, and that it's just one of those things where you're immersed into it so much that you start to pick up on it. I'm still a little bit nervous about that, though.
Oh, that's so funny. I feel like I'm so good at it. Like,
Oh, yeah?
after covering Black Sails for so long, I was so proud of myself. I was just like, I know what that is.
Sure.
I do know what a quarter deck is as opposed to other decks.
Yes.
There were so many terms that I knew. Like, I know how they measure knots.
Yeah, that's right.
I know what togallants are. I was very excited actually with how much of the stuff I actually knew.
Yeah.
Thank you, Black Sails creators. I now know a lot of stuff about ships. So yeah, so from what I understand, this movie is made up of like bits and pieces from different books.
That's what I've heard too. Yes.
Right. So that's kind of fascinating. And so Patrick O'Brien wrote the books. Peter Weir and John Colley wrote the screenplay. And then there's just a bunch of actors in here that
Right?
so many actors that I was like, oh, look at that person.
Yes.
Oh, look at that person.
It's Jarvis. Yeah.
It's Jarvis. I knew you would be excited about that.
And there's Billy Boyd. Yeah. It was fantastic.
And Chris Larkin is the brother of Toby Stevens. And
Yes,
he actually
and he's in
was
the red coat again. So you see me like, I know this guy.
Yep.
He's a jerk.
So
Once again, playing the idiot. I'm sorry, but I got really mad. Really mad.
You got really mad and you didn't even know why you were getting really mad at him.
No, I
so
knew
much.
it was him, but no, I just meant when he had his whole shooting incident. First of all, you're not supposed to shoot an albatross anyway. What are you, new? Everybody knows this.
Yes, we are going to talk about the albatross.
We'll
Fascinating.
get to it. Yes.
But yes, true. He totally shot my boy.
But I knew he'd be your boy.
He's my boy. Yes. So I love that Chris Larkin, who is from Black Sails and brother of the star of Black Sails, is in it. That was fun. So it was just so many fun actors. I like Russell Crowe, but I'm a Paul Bettany person.
It's the two of them together, I think, that I just love so much. I mean, Aubrey and Stephen anyway are just these fantastic characters, and their relationship is gorgeous. But to put them, to have it be the two actors who have such great chemistry and who are so close already works for me on every possible level.
Yeah, no, it was fabulous. Yes. Yeah, well, we're going to talk a whole lot about their relationship. I wanted to hear, like, why, I mean, you basically brought this to the show. Like, I'm so curious. Like, so tell me, I mean, you need to tell the listeners because anyone from Fathoms Deep knows this about you, but you maybe should talk about you and ships.
Okay, so I have a thing for tall ships. I have always tried to see tall ships Chicago or when the tall ships come into Boston. I've never been able to do it yet. I've never been aboard one. I have never actually heard the flap of a sail or the creak of the boards underneath me. But one day this will happen. I swear to God, I will make it happen. So I do. I tend to, I love that in fiction and on screen so much. Big fan of White Squall. Have you seen White Squall?
Yeah, I can't do sinking
that's
ships.
Fair. That's fair. You know what? Okay, maybe not that one. I'm a huge fan, but sure, understandable. But these things always spoke to me a lot. There was a novel I read several times growing up called The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle, which had all of this. She came onto the ship, and so she learned all of the. And there was like an appendix in the book where she learned all the terminology. So that's when I learned about like. I used to know exactly when the first dog watch and second dog watch was and all of that and how things were, how the chain of command went aboard a ship. So I've always been just into that. That just always spoke to me. When I watched this movie, I don't remember it very much the first time I saw it in theaters. It was just so long ago. But I saw it again a few years ago, and I remember it speaking to me so profoundly about how to speak honestly with someone who is technically in authority over me, but who I still have a personal relationship with, and how to make that mutually respectful.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yes, that is a huge part of this.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
great.
really beautiful for me just to kind of help me know that to have someone who you love, who also, because of just the nature of your relationship, gets to call the shots, doesn't mean that you can't say occasionally, hey, wait a minute, I think this is a bad idea.
Right.
So it really kind of changed the whole nature of my relationships at the time.
Yeah. Hey, wait a minute. I really understand why mutinies happen.
Right?
No, that's so cool. I remember this coming out. I remember people talking about it. Obviously, I mean, one of the reasons why, we kept thinking about doing this for our first podcast was because there's just really no way to talk about Black Sails without Master and Commander coming up a lot.
Yeah.
And again, it's just not a movie I thought about a lot. I mean, I like the actors. It looked cool, but to me, I just always had this assumption, even though I like action movies, it's not that I just never drawn to ships until now. And now,
yes.
Oh, so drawn to ships. So it's funny. Like, I definitely went into this with, kind of with a Black Sails lens. Like, there's just no way. I mean, I've spent years
it'd be
now
impossible
really,
not to.
right,
Sure.
impossible not to. And that was really interesting because there are a lot of parallels.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of not parallels. Like, there's just a lot of things here that are so significantly different. And that was really surprising and fun for me because I realized that I've spent the past year and a half intensively, but a few years like in this one story about ships that is my favorite story. But it was really neat to go outside of that and see like different things, like so many things that were so many details that are similar, but that the kind of overall themes are quite different.
Yes. Well, and it's so much set within the world of civilization, within that chain of command. And the conversations that they have about it are so dissimilar to what we heard in Black Sails, because in Black Sails, it was such a personal nature that had these conversations happening. And this was a very kind of philosophical worldview argument, which was so very different, but still fascinating to watch.
Absolutely. Really interesting and just a very different dynamic. There are a few things I wanted to bring up before we start talking about characters. One, children, just generally children in jeopardy is a hard thing for me. And
oh, God, yeah. Well,
they did it really well.
Didn't they?
Yes.
I completely agree.
So I just wanted to say that off the bat. And then there's just, maybe we'll bring this in later, but just, I loved all the details about the life there. I really, really enjoyed, what might be considered just the minutia of their life, but I feel like it was so much about that, and that was really beautiful. All right, let's start talking about characters, as we do.
Clearly something terribly nautical and fascinating just happened. I had a lot.
Well, enthusiasm seems to have taken over where precision usually lives. We mispronounced 2 names during this whole podcast. So, we are sorry, listeners. Also sorry, Blakeney and Killick. We love both of you and are not sure why we mispronounced your names. But on the flip side, this may have been one of our favorite podcast recordings ever. Enjoy.
Jack, I fear you may have burdened me with the debt I can never fully repay.
Tosh. Name a shrub after me. Something prickly and hard to eradicate.
Well, let me ask you first, Daphne. So which of the characters, particularly among Jack and Stephen, but if there's somebody else, you can definitely go with those. But which one, I'm wondering, did you identify with most? Which one was like your avatar on this ship?
Oh, that's so funny. I think I did tweet about this, hinting what I think each of ours is.
You did. I threw you a softball for your first question, Daphne.
You did throw me a softball. For me, it's Steven, for sure. Steven's my guy. Steven's like, he's the one. I mean, it's funny. Yeah, we have joked so many times about me being, a firm captain, which I am not.
You're a bit of a firm captain.
Only in podcast land.
I'm just saying, as being the Steven to your Jack sometimes.
No, Steven's my guy. And I don't know. Maybe I am a Jack, and maybe that's why I find Steven so engaging. I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Is there one of the 2 characters that you're drawn to as like the kind of people who you want to bring into your life to complement you? Is that why you like Stephen as much as you did? Or do you feel like he thinks the way that you think?
He thinks the way that I think.
Okay.
He totally thinks the way that I think. Yeah. I think that's what it is. I would like to think that. I like both of them, but I
love them both. I don't feel that I'm very much like either of them, but I love both of them.
See, it's funny. Like, I made the joke because I see Steven as the basically like the nerdy person who's really into minutia, and that's me. And
sure, okay, yeah.
Jack is the one who's gonna like race down the rigging and like laugh in the face of a storm.
Yes,
that's kind of you.
Is that kind of me? I'll accept that. I like it. I mean, if I'm going to be like somebody, then Lucky Jack doesn't seem like a terrible person to be like. I don't necessarily feel that way, but all right. On the subject of Jack and Stephen, did you feel that they were equals and partners? And I wonder what you thought about like the tension between Stephen being under Jack's command and how that changed the way that they had to communicate both in public and in private.
Oh, that's a really interesting question. And I wrote all these notes about the two of them as a character pairing, but I didn't really cover that. So I'm really happy you asked that.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
that was the part that really got my wheels turning when I watched the movie, is just that way that they had to work alongside each other, I suppose. And it's so similar but different to the way that Flint and Silver did. Like, it's reminiscent of the two of them, but very different, I feel like, especially because they seem to have this long history behind them.
Right. Yeah, I feel like we should have just say to everyone who hasn't watched Black Sails, sorry, also go watch Black Sails, because we're going to do a lot of this.
It's going to get referenced a lot. It was our original podcast, and it's become really a part of our shared language together.
Yes, it's true.
And I'm not sorry for that. I'm really not. But it will occasionally.
That's true. That's totally true. It is, even privately, even without microphones in front of our faces.
Absolutely.
We use Black Sails as a way to analyze the world and relationships. Mm-hmm. I find that fascinating. I mean, I definitely thought a lot, and then I didn't put in my notes about Jack and Stephen versus James and John. No, Flint and Silver.
Yeah,
definitely going to call them by their last names.
It's so hard for me because I keep wanting to say Aubrey and Stephen, but that's weird because it's mixing up their names.
Well, I feel like they work better generally as a pair. Like, I feel like they get it better. Like, definitely when they're in the officers, like, they get like the whole united front part better.
I thought about that, how they were like parents. They seemed like a married couple who were the parents on the ship in a lot of ways.
A lot of ways. You know, Flint and Silver like have this slice of period where they really are partners, like truly partners, and they talk about working together and having no daylight between them. But I feel like these two have a lot more practice with it, and both get it a lot better. Like, definitely Jack is the man in charge. Obviously, this is a hierarchy, no matter what Stephen thinks.
Yeah, there is a chain of command, and Stephen is beneath the captain, of course, as the doctor on the ship. Mm-hmm.
Right, absolutely. And
you know, there are parallels here too, aren't there, to Kirk and Bones?
My God.
Yes,
right.
because even though he's technically underneath Kirk, and Kirk is obviously, you know, the commander of the ship, what the doctor does is so different because, you know, his work is in the medical field, and because he's such an expert in his field, that they get to kind of communicate in a way that's very different from the way he would talk to.
That's totally true. Although that would make Stephen like kind of like Bones and Spock at the same time, because he's also the man of reason.
Yes. From a personality point of view, he's much more like Spock, but from his position on the ship and the way that he can talk to the captain, I think.
Yeah, no, he's kind of both, because he does speak from emotion as well. I mean, he definitely is, in a lot of ways, you know, the emotional core as well of the two of them.
He's a very well-rounded character. He is not one-dimensional at all, because they could have made him very Spock-like. They could have made him just, you know, man of reason, scientist, medical doctor who just who just held Jack accountable. But I think they did much more with that, because he is also the emotional appeal.
Right. Well, I feel, in addition to their hierarchy, kind of emotionally, Jack does arc and he does learn. Yes. But Jack is who Jack is very much. Like, and that makes sense, because he's the man who is the man of tradition and the man of the hierarchy and the man. So he is who he is. And he's almost, you know, he kind of stands there in his selfness, which is very large. Right? Yes. It's very large.
Can we just say for a second, too, how only Russell Crowe and maybe a few others can make that super ruffly shirt look masculine and sexy as hell?
I know, right?
How are you doing this?
I did totally think about that. There was some ruffly shirt moment where he's not wearing a jacket where I was like, damn, you are pulling this off. Barely, but you're totally pulling it off. But so Jack is just like, he is this kind of larger than life figure, but he doesn't fill all of the spaces. And I almost feel like what Stephen's job is, and this isn't to take away from his importance and his selfness, but I almost feel like what Stephen's job in their relationship, and perhaps also on the ship, is to fill all of the spaces in between where Jack sits. Like, Jack is the things that he is. Mm-hmm. And Stephen, in a way, has possibly kind of molded himself around Jack I just kept thinking about also a Black Sound Sales line. Like what I kept thinking about with them is the world in balance.
Mm-hmm. Yes, those two are the world in balance.
Those two are the world in balance, and we see them when they are in harmony and when they're not in harmony with each other, and the world responds to that. The world around them seems to be molded by the extent to which it seems you could say that they're reacting to the world and that's what's giving them disharmony, but you could also see that when they are not in harmony with each other, the rest of the world kind of starts falling apart.
Oh, interesting. Break that down for me some more.
Let's hold on to that thought for a little bit. Like that's let me just lay that out there as an idea, like as my theory, and then we can kind of go through the parts of it.
Yeah.
But
I have some things that I want to kind of to talk about and to dialogue about when it comes to them being in disharmony and how they work through it, because I found that fascinating too.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, maybe we should move on and start talking about them as characters. I thought there's some neat structural things about how we are introduced to them and how we see progressions. Like we have this framework, right? We have a framework of like all these ships things. We have three engagements.
Yes.
With the French ship that I keep
the
forgetting.
Acheron.
Thank you.
The Acheron.
Right. And we have three engagements.
The French accent cracked me up. It was just so like,
I
am the Frenchman. I am here to take your ship. Okay.
Right. I am the doctor, but not really. Which I'm not going to do in a French accent. That's your job.
Yes. That was so clever, though.
That was very clever.
Oh, so
There's a lot of clever. This is, you know how I love that. Like it's smart people being smart is one of my favorite things. So we have three engagements with the French ship. We have 3 dinners with the officers.
Oh.
And we kind of have 3 times when they're doing music with each other. The middle one, we don't really see them like full on playing music with each other. But we have 3, 3, and 3, which is fascinating to me. Had I watched this more times, you know how I like to watch things many times. I only got like 2.5 watches in this time.
2.5 watches. You're so adorable. It's like a 2.5-hour show.
I know.
Good Lord.
I know. But I was like, oh, there's a structure here that I really want to like totally unpick. And I didn't get quite there. But I did see that there were 3s, and I thought that was fascinating. They all have to have a relationship with each other. There's just no way that they don't. And I didn't quite get there, but I found it really, really interesting.
Yeah, because even musically speaking, they're very different. Because the very first session that they sit down is very classical, very practiced, right?
Yeah.
And then the second one is
also a little bit, but they're kind of but they're interrupted. So like the second one's
basically
more about conversation. Like the second one's more about like that moment, because that is the moment where Jack says to Stephen, you're going to go, I'm taking you to these islands and you get to like go explore and do your thing. And he gives him the promise that he's about to break.
Oh, so it's the introduction of the disharmony.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
Very good.
So like the first one is harmony.
Mm-hmm.
I may have to read the line.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So in the first one, I love it because they're totally in harmony. They had this lovely dinner with everyone. And then when they start, Stephen says, how about this? Are you in the mood for something more aggressive? And I just love that because I just felt like both of them. Like it felt like Stephen was like, I was like, hey, this is what I'm into, but I kind of know who you are. So maybe you want this other thing. And Jack didn't even respond. They just started playing, and they were and they were playing their instruments in the traditional way, very classical music.
Beautiful music too.
Beautiful music.
Say.
Yes, totally beautiful music. And then in the middle one is when, that's on the precipice, before Jack's about to break his promise. He makes his promise that he's about to break. And then they go through all the stuff that they go through, and they go through the synthesis of kind of understanding each other and learning from each other. And then the last music, they start playing their instruments wrong. Like they just start playing them in not in the ways those instruments were meant to be played. Like
sure, at least from a classical standpoint.
Right, exactly.
They really kind of break the order and the structure.
They break, and they were like, and I felt like that was like their truest moment. Like the end is when they're like, we're just doing whatever the hell we feel
That's
like.
right.
Like
we're
like,
just friends having a good time together.
Exactly.
And whenever you see that kind of, I am not personally a musician, but I have known quite a few musicians, and that idea of a jam session of like you come together and somebody starts something, and then you just kind of riff off the other person. You create something brand new together. Right. It's perfect. It's the perfect way to end this movie.
Right. Well, and it was especially funny because it was like Jack starts playing his violin like a ukulele. Like for a minute I thought he had a ukulele.
Which was adorable.
Which I was like trying to think like time, history and where they might have been. Like, would they have a ukulele? And I was like, oh no, that's totally his violin. And then the thing I love most is then Steven takes a cello and starts playing it like that too, and I was just like, okay, that I've never seen. That's just nutty. I love it so much.
It was fantastic. I completely agree.
It was just so I just felt like there's just like this fascinating thing, and the music is a bit of a frame, like, because it's a thing they also do together. I mean, there's two things that they do together when they're alone. They play music, and they have like really important discussions about the philosophy of leadership.
Yes. Sorry, I'm into that part. The music is good too, but the discussions about the philosophy of leadership are amazing. Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to talk just generally first about like who they are. I love that both of them are like the best at what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we have all of these amazing examples of that.
I think that's what makes them absolutely equals and partners, is because they are both just at the top level of competence in their given thing that they do. And not only competence, but talent as well. Like, like they're not just good at their jobs. They have an innate talent for the thing that they do.
Yes, that's totally true. Right. I never really answered your question, did I? Like, because you asked if they're equals or if they...
Yeah, if you saw them as such. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess that's true. In the hierarchy, because there has to be, they're not equals. But as men, they are 100% equals. And I think I think that might be part of the disharmony, is that is when the disharmony happens, is when Jack
pulls rank,
when he ceases to recognize that for a little bit, and that his redemption is when he does recognize it again, that the friendship and the partnership is greater than his own urges. Okay, we'll go through that.
We'll go through that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree generally. I don't know if the structure of the story supports that specifically, but yes.
Okay.
Only because I think that Steven was wrong and Jack was right, but maybe it's because I am Jack. Maybe I was all the time. No, I think they both had to learn. I think that...
Right. No, they definitely both had to learn. Ooh. Okay, this conversation just got more interesting. Okay. I'm like I feel like I might end up just scrapping all of the other topics that I had for later, because we just maybe need to hash this out. Oh, I'm so fascinated. Okay, so let's just go through like some of the things that are fascinating about them. With Steven, obviously that brain surgery, holy shit.
Amazing, right? And at first I was like, why is he doing this just out there in the middle of the light? Of course, the light.
Light, and also this is before they really get germs and such.
That is true.
When they go into battle, like I love that also when they like are. I mean, I love that we're like instantly surprised by this attack by the
Acheron.
I really
Acheron. I'm gonna do it every time.
Yeah, do it every time. I'm just gonna cue you to say it each time.
My French is terrible, by the way. Truly awful,
but I'm enjoying it. So I love that we start out like, boom, we're just like right in it. We're just like, we have this quiet moment in the beginning, kind of introducing bits of pieces of the life of the ship.
Yes.
And then immediately the ship is on them and they have to deal with this crisis. Like we just immediately see them in crisis.
Yeah, I was not expecting this, but because we got the little, title card? We got the little title card there right at first, and where it said, "Oceans are now a battlefield," which was freaking amazing, right? Just amazing. And you see all the cannons that have names. I'm like, yes, we're naming cannons now? Why didn't I think of that?
I love that you love that.
I like names in general. They're very important.
Also like things about ships.
And things about ships. Yes. Yes,
to an extent that I never will. That's so adorable.
Oh, dear. But anyhow, I was not expecting to see just that ship, the Acheron, so quickly, because it came up on them and we saw the word painted on the hull, and I was shocked that we saw it so quick, because usually that's not how it works. Usually you chase the thing and you have Act 1, you have Act 2, Act 3, they find the ship. But no, we were right there from the get-go.
Well, and they're already kind of inverting what you think is going to happen, because you know that they're seeking out this ship. Like, they have orders to sink or capture this ship, but what we find out almost immediately is that this ship is actually pursuing them and being really smart about it.
Yes.
Super smart about it. So yeah, so I love that. I love seeing just we immediately see how good Jack is at all this stuff. Like, we see how smart he is. We see every single time he comes up with a plan B, and his plan B is brilliant.
It's so good. I love to see him think on his feet. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
He's so good at that. And that, also made me think of Flint. That man will always come up with a solution.
Of course, yeah.
And also just his joy in the battle. Like, I don't think in the first one he had that, but in the later ones, he's just like, that man is never
he was
happier.
Pissed at first because he got...
surprised.
He got surprised. He got taken advantage of. And his ship is called a surprise, which is a nice little piece of irony. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, he finally got to do surprise at the end. Mm-hmm. Well, and the second time he's pissed too, and yet he still's kind of like, he's pissed, but he's also kind of loving it. Like,
kind of loving it, yeah.
Right.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I mean, he has that line to...
Blakely is the blonde who's the best.
No, so he has the line...
And then there's that other kid.
Right. He has the line to Calamity where he, sent him to do the decoy ship thing on the second time.
Yes.
And he comes off of that and he's like, tell me that wasn't fun.
Yeah.
He loves this.
He does.
Loves what he does.
And the kid is like, yes, sir. Yes, that was fun.
Right. Well, right. We're going to get into that. Like, I think the kids are very important in understanding the relationship of these two adult men.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I love that he's just so fucking good at this. He's so good at the strategy, which I love. I love
competence
strategy.
Porn all the way.
Right.
Yes.
All the way. Mm-hmm. But also his joy in it. Like, this is the place where he deviates from my favorite captain ever, Captain Flint. Is just like, he loves this.
Yeah.
He really loves this. And
he's
this
like a quarterback of a football team or something.
He
yeah.
is,
Like he's,
oh my
it's
God,
a sport
he is kind of that guy.
Yeah.
He is that guy. And it's like, you can tell, like, textually from the movie that he has been there forever. He's been doing this since he was a little kid, basically. He has been with this great Sir Nelson, this great captain that everyone obviously is so
Lord
in awe
Nelson.
of. Lord
Yes.
Nelson. Yeah. I don't know. There's something about his joy that really gives me a lot of joy. And also you can see how that translates to the crew. That, I mean, obviously he's lucky. It's part of his nickname, but...
Yes.
So everything has gone well for him, which I would argue probably has never been luck, has always been competency. But I think it's the combination of the two.
I agree.
He has his crew. His crew is his crew.
Yes. Well, much in the same way that he admires Lord Nelson. I love that when they're talking, everybody says, will you tell us a story about him?
Yes.
And he says, the things that he said would sound like rhetoric or just the worst kind of stuff, whatever he says. But he says, with Nelson, you felt your heart glow.
I know.
And he does the same thing when he does his whole pitch to everybody down below decks before they finally take the Acheron. Then he's absolutely doing that same thing. And Stephen also sees that because he says, well, then he would seem to be the exception to the rule that authority corrupts.
Right. Although authority corrupting is a topic. That's something we're going to get. We are going to get into. Yeah, we are going to get into that. So yeah, so maybe Nelson. I mean, again, he's reminiscing about Nelson. Nelson is the person he looks up to.
Yes.
Had Calamity survived and become him, which I think was kind of what we were supposed to feel like, is that he was grooming him in particular. Again, we'll talk about the boys.
So
he was.
I couldn't
grooming
even
him.
see that because I was so in love with Blakely from minute one. Blakely is my guy.
I know, mine too. That's what I should have said. That ultimately, the character I love most is Blakely.
Yes.
It's just that simple. Like,
of all of the characters,
he's the star of this. Like, these two adults are amazing, and it's all Blakely. Yes, we will get into that.
Heard, and this was a long time ago, so I might even be wrong, but I believe I have heard that he grows so much as a character and just continues to get more and more awesome. So,
in the books.
In the books, they know he's amazing.
Oh shit! Now I have to read the books,
right? For Blakely alone,
because I love those two, but Blakely.
But
wow,
Blakely.
You have just sold me on these books. That's it. I am reading these books. I have to now.
Blakely makes my mama heart just come alive.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. But we have to talk about Blakely thematically soon. But yes,
Okay,
I agree with
sure.
you. He's amazing.
He is amazing. He's the Harry Potter of the piece.
I think that part of why Jack is so good at inspiring his crew, and in that speech that you said near the end, he talks about the ship being their home. And
Yes.
for me, that was when I really got it. Like, you kind of see this throughout, but you really get it. Like, he was one of them when he was young. He is one of them. He gets it. He understands them. And part of their love for him
Yes.
is not just that he's an amazing tactician. Obviously, he is. And not just that he's inspiring. And they even said in that one dinner that Lord Nelson was not a great seaman, but he was a great tactician.
Yes. You just can't say seaman, can you?
No, I can't. Nope. Tried really hard to not make it sound like that.
That's fine.
Shush, Liz. Yeah, we really need to change. Well, we will. We're going to change topics very soon to something that has nothing to do with boats. As much as I love them, that I'm no longer in danger of saying that word. But the difference is that Jack is one of them. He's a great
Yes.
leader. He's got everything, basically. He's a great leader. He's a great tactician. And he gets them. Like, he understands them where they live.
Now that's interesting. How does that change the conversation he has with Hollum then? Because he says to Hollum, you cannot be one of them, that they want to be led. Do you think that that's what he thinks, but not what he does or is?
No, he is one of them in a way that Hollum never was one of them. That's the thing, is that Hollum never understood the life. He never, I mean, it's so sad.
It is so sad.
Right, it's
no,
so sad.
And I think you can see it on Jack's face. I think
Right,
that when
he
Hollum
knows.
leaves that room,
He knows.
he knows.
He
Yeah.
knows. He totally knows. And you see that later. I mean, this is, again, part of how we see that Jack is one of them, is that conversation between Jack and Stephen where Jack's like, oh, he's cursed. And Stephen's like, no way, you don't believe this too. And he's like, not everything's in your books.
is in your books.
Right. He is. I mean, this is one of the places where these two dear friends who are so close and so intimate are basically divided, is that
Yes.
Jack is of that world. And like Hollum, I mean, that was what's fascinating to me in a different way, but like Hollum, Stephen is not really of that world.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the line that really made that stand out to me is actually after Stephen was shot. And Jack said that he would leave the tent while they're doing the surgery. And Stephen said, I need a
steady hands.
steady hands. And he says, and Jack says, my dear doctor, I've been amongst and around wounds all of my life. And that could be said of both of them.
That's very true.
But like every parallel, you start to see where the parallel doesn't fit. And the difference is that Jack is a man of war. He even calls himself that. There's that joke also where he says, are you calling me an old man of war? Jack is a man of war. And Stephen is a man of healing. He's a man of life. He's a naturalist. He's a doctor and a naturalist. He's a man who preserves and studies life. And so his intimacy with wounds is to heal them. Jack's intimacy with wounds is to create them. And this is, in my eyes,
that's so interesting.
this is the point of friction between the two of them.
Yeah.
It's not just that. I mean, it comes into other things of hierarchy, but ultimately for Jack, being a man of war includes all of that stuff, includes the hierarchy, includes the devotion.
Yes.
And I think includes the obsession, like to reach
Yes.
that level of leadership. Not everyone, and Hollum is the example to us, not everyone is capable of that.
Right.
Not every man, some men will be 30 years old and have young boys actually outrank them
Yes.
because they're just not actually they don't fit in that world.
They're not built for that world.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. And I kept thinking this about Hollum, that Hollum could excel so many other places. He seemed bright
very
enough
compassionate,
and,
right?
Yes, yes, and I thought of his lovely singing voice on ship, and like
I
he
know.
had a heart that wanted to belong, and he and Blakely were lovely together,
Right.
So I just think, God, he needed to be in a shop in London somewhere. He needed to be an accountant. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
He's just in the wrong spot.
And that was the fate of a lot of men at that time, is that, you know, when part of the thing about having children on this ship, a lot of aristocratic men were officers because they were second sons or third sons, that they were the ones who wouldn't inherit.
Yes.
So going to sea, I mean, that's, you know, this is a basic also division we have on this ship, is that, and Stephen talks about this, that we have men who are pressed into service. We know
Right.
about this from Black Sails.
Yes.
Men were literally and boys were literally just rounded up and put on boats and did not have a choice. Mm-hmm. This was part of the culture at the time. So that's when Stephen's talking about, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So that's the crew. And we do need to talk about that, the two cultures that are happening, even though the officers are still part of it. I mean, it's just fascinating. It's like they're part of the same organism, but they're not the same.
Yeah,
So these
No has
young
a very
boys-
upstairs downstairs feel.
Yes,
It
there is that as
absolutely
well.
does. Mm-hmm.
And yet all of that is part of the culture of the Navy. So in a way,
Yes.
even though the upstairs downstairs exists, they're the people who are part of it and fit and work in that hierarchy, and they're the people
Sure.
who don't. And so Hollum doesn't to the extreme. Stephen, again, this is where I get into this whole thing of him kind of filling the spaces in between. He is not of it. He obviously doesn't always fit with it. And yet there's something special about him where because he and Jack complement each other, they do become almost like one unit.
Yes. This is so interesting because Stephen really does, if he lives in that in-between space, it makes him that much more reliant on Jack because Jack is his actual friend. I can imagine that if he was on any other ship, he would be completely isolated and alone.
Exactly. He and Jack have a special relationship. Jack is of that world, like he's so essentially of that world, but he does have he has a level of connectedness and sophistication that allows him to see Stephen. And that's what I want to talk about, because this is something that's always very important to you. And so I always see it now, is this idea of people seeing each other. Mm-hmm. That's also a thing that has a progress through the story.
For both of them, yes.
But especially, I really enjoyed when Stephen did commentary to Jack on Jack. Like that he explained Jack to himself. So there's a few. So
he did that a few times. And it's a very spousal relationship in that way, because I think that the best spouses do that for each other.
Yes.
They hold up a mirror so that you can see how I see you and who you really are.
I love that you use the word mirror, because that's literally what I wrote down the first time. Because when, after the first battle, when they were so surprised and Jack was so angry and he had just went to see Blakely and he was so concerned about him and they were talking about Blakely. So Stephen says to Jack, when he's like taking care of the splinter or whatever he had in his forehead, he says to him, "He fights like you fight," meaning the French captain.
Yes, yes. That was, I think, the first time that we really got Jack and Stephen together, too. Because, we really saw their dynamic.
We just had battle before that.
That's right. That was it. Because I loved when Stephen said, "Let me take a look at your brow." And everything I know about stories makes me say that this captain's going to say, no, it's fine, brush it off.
Right.
But he immediately sits down.
Right.
And
he does.
That's when I was like, okay, this is something different. Their relationship that they have is something different.
I love that. That's totally true. And right. And so appropriate for both of them that Jack didn't even notice he had a wound.
Right.
Because he was this is also, I think, a fascinating part of Jack's captaincy in relation to James Flint, who we adore. But Jack cares about his crew.
Jack does care very much about his crew, so much that I think, you mentioned that he didn't seem to even notice that he was wounded. Mm-hmm. I think that when he is in battle, he goes into this, the captain mode, the battle warrior mode. And that's why he got a little green. He got a little nervous when he was in that tent helping swab up Stephen, because yes, he's been around wounds his whole life, but it's in a setting of war where you disconnect, you turn it off, you don't feel it at the time in the same way where he did being in that room in that close proximity with someone that he cared for so much.
Oh, I love that. So they each have their strengths. I mean,
Yes.
not that Stephen isn't good in battle. We saw
I was
him
going to
in
say,
battle.
because Stephen completely kicked ass in battle, which was amazing when he boarded the Acheron and was just
Wow.
slicing people up. Remember? He was
So
very
my-
Jack Rackham. He even had like the long coat and
Yep.
everything.
Might Stephen actually be the stronger one? Because they also had that conversation where Stephen is comforting after they lost, what is his name? After with the Tegallant situation, after they had to
Yes.
cut off the Tegallants and they lost
Wally?
something like that.
It was
yes.
like Worley, but it sounded like Wally. It was spelled
Right.
Worley, but because
Right.
they're British, it sounds like
Exactly.
Wally.
Yes. And it's the boy,
The blonde kid.
the blonde kid who had talked about his wedding and how they figured out the how the shape of the ship hull. Yeah, that whole
Which was
story.
impossible, but fine.
You know what? I don't care. I
Just
really
let it
liked
go.
it.
It was great. No, it was great.
I loved those two boys. I love that one of them had the story and then the other one made a model and was like, here you go, Captain. Let us hand you all of the information you need. And then
Yes.
we're both going to die tragically.
Oh, I know. And God, that the brunette kid. I'm sorry, it's the brunette and the blonde now, but
Right, he's
the
Joe.
brunette kid, Joe. Okay, so Joe is the one who actually cut the ropes.
He's the one who actually cut the ropes, yes.
Oh God.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I could
tears.
delve.
That was a beautiful scene.
Right. Joe also, wow, we're getting way off of Jack and Stephen, but it's okay. We'll get back there. Joe is
That's okay.
fascinating.
We're talking
because-
characters. This is fine.
Right. Because Joe has a really interesting progression. So like the first time we really see Joe is in that moment when they're giving the model ship to Jack.
Yes.
And then he understands. I mean, again, he's of that world. He understands, like
Yes.
Jack does, the need to sacrifice the individual for the sake
Yes.
of the whole. And that, I mean, the whole ship would have gone down had they not cut off that Tegallant. But then he's also one of the main people in the whole, the whole Hallam is the Jonah thing.
Yes.
He's the one who disrespects him, who like doesn't salute him. He's the one
Not only
who-
doesn't salute him, but runs into him.
right,
with his
runs
shoulder,
into him, like aggressive to
flagrant
him.
disrespect.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. And then he is the one that gets flogged.
Yes.
So he's a really interesting. I don't know if he's really interesting as a character himself, but he's fun, and you see him. He's the one who talks about
Sure.
pirates. Like he's part of the singing. Like he's part of all of the kind of communal crew moments.
Yeah. He gives us a different perspective.
Right. He's very central to kind of the crew perspective. And
yes, absolutely.
he also then he's very integral to the conversations, all of the conversations that Stephen and Jack have about leadership. Because one of their big conversations is about, and this is bringing back to what you said about, I find that fascinating. I hadn't thought about the fact that Jack is squeamish about healing when he talks about wounds. Again, this dichotomy of them and their relationships with wounds. Stephen's good at creating wounds and healing wounds. And he's the one who's comforting Jack and saying, when it happens in battle, it's not hard for me. And I can tell myself, even when someone dies, when I'm trying to heal them, that it was actually the enemy that killed them.
Right. That it's hard, but that he can do it. Yeah.
Right. Stephen's actually better at dealing with the reality of losing crew members on a way. Like Jack can do it in the moment, like you said. Like he in that moment can take care of things. It was obviously hard for him to decide to break off the ropes to that Tegallant, but
Right.
he'll do it. But Stephen's actually the one who's better at dealing with kind of the philosophical questions about losing crew.
Which I wonder if that is also part of being a naturalist and an evolutionist.
Right.
Is just knowing that sometimes there are things that happen that are beyond our control in a way that Jack can't accept because Jack is such a captain and has to feel in control of the situation.
Right, exactly. Well, or being a more flexible person is that if you're a
Sure.
person of hierarchy, you're a person you have a kind of conservative nature to some level. I mean, Jack's very creative because he thinks strategically,
Yes.
but ultimately he's based in the hierarchy. He's based in something that he does not want to change, and he talks about that a lot with Stephen.
Yes.
Whereas Stephen is a person, he's an anarchist. I mean, he's basically like Jack accuses him of an anarchist, but he is
Yeah.
kind of an anarchist, or at the very least a liberal.
Very much so.
So he is more comfortable with shifting sands. He's more comfortable with the hierarchy not standing and being a base on which one can stand.
What did you think about that? What do you think about Stephen's worldview, his political anarchical worldview aboard a ship? Do you think that he's right? Do you think he's naive? Do you think...
Well,
what do you think?
Right. Because
do you think that Joe had to be flogged or no?
Yes, I do think that Joe had to be flogged. I do agree that Joe. Yeah. See, I don't know if I think both of them are wrong some of the time. I mean, I think that's the ultimate. That's what's interesting about their relationship.
World. Yes,
right. That's what's interesting about their relationship. If one of them was right and one of them was wrong, that would be less interesting. And I think that they do that beautifully. That both of them have to learn things.
Yes.
And yes, flogging Joe was the correct thing to do, as horrible as it was for everyone, including us, to watch. Because when Jack was giving that rousing speech, he said, for us, this ship is the world. Or maybe that's what he said to Stephen. Like, this is our world. We're far away from home, and this is our world. And he's right. I mean, a mutiny would be the death of all of them.
Of all of them. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So absolutely, he's right in that case. I think the point where Jack becomes wrong, and this is maybe we should talk about the albatrosses.
Oh,
We have 2 albatrosses in this movie.
Do we have 2?
We do. We have 2 albatrosses. Each of them gets their own albatross. And so I just wanted to take a second to talk symbolically, like what an albatross means symbolically. Mm-hmm. An albatross, in a literary symbolic sense, is a psychological burden.
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Our first albatross is not actually the physical albatross that ends up with Stephen getting shot. The first albatross is when they get to the Galapagos. When, basically, after the promise, where
our
Jack
flightless comrade?
says, no, the ship. When they get to the Galapagos, I love this. When they get to the Galapagos, I feel like that was a moment where we saw who everyone is. So when we get to the Galapagos, the crew are looking through their spyglasses and saying, oh, these things, everything's so ugly, and oh my God, there's no women, right? So they're like being what we would imagine the crew to be.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So the crew's doing that. Mm-hmm. Stephen and Blakely are identifying new species, right? Totally
They're so
excited.
Cute. Yes, and very exciting.
Right?
Yes.
So they're looking through the glass.
And Blakely's learning to write with his left hand.
Oh my God.
I was like, God, he has terrible handwriting. And then Sarah pointed out he probably wasn't a lefty. And I was like, oh my God, he probably wasn't a lefty.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's also perfect for Blakely. We need to talk about Blakely at the end. Right. We need to talk about Blakely and what he means to me at the end, or what I think he means in the story at the end, but that actually adds to it. So, okay, crew's doing that. Stephen and Blakely are doing that. What's Jack doing? He's looking and seeing debris in the water, and then they see those crew members, the merchant crew members, that had been attacked by our French ship. Tell me the name.
The Acheron.
Thank you. Now I have no motivation to even remember the name.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that's what Jack sees. And I just loved that. I just felt like, because of this whole thing that I had gotten in my head about one of them representing life and one of them representing war and death, like the idea that at the moment when Stephen's identifying new species, Jack's looking at the debris of a battle.
Wow. Yeah, that's very good.
And the ship that had been attacked, the people that they rescued, was called the Albatross.
Oh, I didn't realize. That's a good connection.
And that is the moment where Jack says, oh yeah, remember that thing that I told you about how we were going to have this lovely time, like we were going to take a break from all the war stuff and have this lovely time in the Galapagos and rest, and you can do your naturalist thing and all of that. And he's like, nope, sorry.
Gotta go.
And
although I have to say, this is the point where I agree with him on this.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. They're both interesting. Okay, so you agree with Jack again here. I kind of don't. Like, this is
why is that?
Oh, maybe it's not here. Maybe it's later. Maybe it's after the doldrums, I guess, where he starts getting like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, I'm getting my timeline off. That's true. Okay. So it's
a
after
long
the
movie.
doldrums.
That's fair.
It's it's a long movie. There's just a lot of parts.
Yes.
So yeah, but he does break his. Well, do I think he's right? Interesting. I'm basically against breaking promises. It is an interesting discussion.
But again, he's a man of duty, and
Right.
he has his orders. And how is he going to explain to his higher in command? Yes, the Acheron was right there. We knew he had just been
Right.
there and just left, but I promised my buddy he could go look at lizards.
Right, that he could do his hobby.
Yeah, no, that's not.
Right. Okay.
God, that line, I do not have time for your goddamn hobbies, man. I was like,
Exactly. Right. So that's kind of, I feel like, okay, even
was
if
right,
you
though.
say that Jack's right,
yes.
it's pretty disrespectful of his friend. This is a moment where like the breakdown
Sure.
between them.
It was disrespectful, but I also see where he was losing patience and why he was stressed and at the end of his rope and why he was frustrated with having to have this conversation at all. Because to him, there was no argument here. Like for him, Stephen does not have a leg to stand on at all. And so the fact that he just keeps pushing back against him.
You see, okay, I'm gonna push back against this a little bit because I
Okay.
mean maybe this is the fact that I'm reading Moby Dick right now. Maybe this is all the time with Black Sails. He's right, kind of, and yet he makes this choice, and look what ends up happening. Like they
No,
end
that's
up in
very
this
true.
storm and losing people. They end up in the doldrums. They end up just with all of this discord. So I feel like the story's kind of telling us that, and then eventually Jack does admit when Stephen says eventually, like, this is feeling like it's personal.
Yes.
Jack does admit, like, okay, I've actually gone beyond my orders. Like he
And
does
they make him
admit,
go south into the snow and
Right.
the awful ice. Yeah.
right. So I'm going to push back a little bit out of this. I think that this albatross that Jack meets is actually tapping into his hubris, is tapping into this idea that he has that he can't lose. And remember when we saw the second ship, the second time that the Acheron
Yes,
attacked
you got
them,
it. Uh-huh.
was fascinating because that's the only time where Jack, I mean, he's talking to himself kind of, but he's not looking at the camera. Like he didn't break the fourth wall, but he is just kind of talking to no one, where he says, this is the second time, I won't let a third time happen. Like
Right.
that's where the moment where you understand that this isn't just his duty, that his pride is now part of it.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. No, that's completely fair.
I think he's talking a good talk
Sure.
about it being duty versus hobby, and yet he does later on say maybe we shouldn't have done that thing.
Yeah.
He admits it himself.
That's a good point.
I think that ship was named the Albatross because we are tapping in exactly into Jack's, his psychological demons. His psychological demon is not being able to not be Lucky Jack.
Sure. Yeah. No, I see exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
To not be an old man of war, but be this sleek modern ship that he envisions the Surprise to be, even though he knows he's up against a ship that's actually better.
Yes. In
But-
every way. Yeah.
right.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's great.
But what's interesting is that Jack, I mean, you could go down that road, right? We could have gone down that road story-wise where Jack is Ahab, where Jack is Flint, and he's just like, has all the pride and has all of the, psychological demons that he can't let go of. But this isn't that story. This is a story where his friend is a mirror, where his friend keeps telling him, I see what you're doing and I see why you're doing it. And that makes him turn another direction. And that's what's most fascinating about this. I mean, as much as, I love tragic heroes, and Jack definitely could have gone down that road. He was
Yes.
he was on the precipice. He
Yes,
was like
absolutely.
waiting.
He could have flinted right out on us. Yes.
Totally gone down that road. But what I love is that the second albatross, when the second albatross appears, and that is when Stephen is wounded. Because, and again, this division between a man of life and a man of war, not Jack in this case, but, Stephen as the outsider to the whole crew, that the whole crew is like, let's shoot that thing. And he's like, let me look at that thing. I'm fascinated. And that's how he gets shot, basically.
Wow, I didn't look at it that way. That's wonderful.
That's totally how I looked at it, that he was just like, he wasn't really paying attention because he was so engrossed with his fascination for this bird, surrounded by men who just see a bird and want to kill it. Mm-hmm. And that's how he gets shot. And so that's our second albatross, and that's the moment where Jack turns away. I mean, they were in pursuit again. They were they were totally set up perfectly, and Jack's like, nope, can't do it.
Just needed to stretch my legs.
Yep, I just needed to stretch my legs. And I love that. It's so beautiful. Again, despite my love of tragic heroes, watching a hero turn away from a tragic path that he could take because he learns, because of the synergy. The two of them have a synergy, and I feel like, I mean, this is, I guess ultimately I do think that Jack's actually more in the wrong. Like, I do understand that Stephen doesn't get the hierarchy, and he's kind of ultimately wrong about what needs to happen on a ship. But I think that when the two of them are in balance, that pushback from Stephen is good for Jack. So, like, Jack comes from one side. He comes from the hierarchy side. Stephen comes from the other side, the anarchy, the humanist side, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And when the two of them are in balance, that's perfect. That they're kind of keeping each other kind of in this better version of themselves than that what they would be without the other one.
Yes. Yes.
But I think it's Jack that broke that. So I think ultimately, kind of in a thematic sense, Jack is the one that's wrong. Jack's the one that broke the harmony. And then I don't know. I can't see
a version of this where they decide to stay on the island. They decide to stay in the Galapagos. They don't pursue the Acheron. They lose her. That's right. And Stephen is right, and they were right to stop. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that it's necessarily the right choice to make. I mean, I think they were kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. But I don't think in that moment that Stephen was seeing Jack.
Right. No, you're right. And then maybe then we're getting more into the question of, like, the nature of human nature and war.
Yes.
Is
sure.
that basically war and a blind following of hierarchy is doomed to some extent. Will always create disharmony.
Yes, certainly. Sure.
Again, that's true. And I love that as a theme. And I totally think that's part of what's happening here. Mm-hmm. There's still the element of the pride.
No, you were absolutely right. There was
the pride is what creates the disharmony between the two of them.
I think that if Stephen didn't already have an inkling that Jack was acting in pride and in hubris, then he would have accepted that because of duty we have to do this thing because we are at war. But he already had in his mind that he was fixated because he's the one who told him he fights like you. He already knew that it had become personal. And so I think maybe he was concentrating so much on the flaws that he knew he had in his friend that he couldn't see the part of Jack that was making the on paper right call. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Yeah. I feel like
I don't think there was a right call to make. No matter what, they would have. This was kind of a lose-lose situation. Like, nobody was going to actually. There wasn't a clear right and wrong, I suppose.
Right. And I think also there's a way to look at this as just like the practical, and then there's a way to look at this kind of in the larger kind of mythological thematic thing. Because I still feel like, the story's telling us because of those doldrums.
Because of the doldrums, because of...
I mean, the storm they loved. I loved... It was wasn't it so much fun to see, like, them in that storm and they're so exuberant, like, because they have great wind, and it's like, that was really neat. Especially because people haven't watched Black Sails, like, there is very important part of the story where you have a storm and then you have doldrums, but it's very different. Like, the circumstances and the feeling is very different. This was interesting for me because at first I saw the storm and I was like, oh, they're in trouble, and I was like, oh no, look at them, they're all so happy.
Now, do you think that the doldrums and the ice of going south, do you think that we were supposed to see that as kind of a mythic punishment for Jack's hubris, or do you think it's coincidental?
I think you could read it that way. I mean, I'm not going to try to impose intent
Jack,
on the writers.
I think Jack would be the first person to say...
Right. Exactly.
Because he does have that kind of superstition, I suppose.
So that's really interesting, because then the whole concept of the Jonah, which I looked up, like that, because there's there's biblical Jonah, right? That's a different story. That's a story of sacrifice. That's a story of things going wrong and then sacrifice fixing it.
Yes.
Which we do have here. I mean, Hallam does sacrifice himself for the sake of the crew. But so it's almost like we have both versions of Jonah. We have the biblical Jonah where Jonah sacrifices himself. But we also have this sailor superstition, which is the Jonah, which is different. That's like kind of like adjacent to, but different than the biblical Jonah, which
like
is
inspired by, basically. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Which is basically this idea that there's someone who's cursed and bringing bad luck on everyone.
Yeah. Well, and the biblical Jonah, the reason that he was cursed and bringing bad luck on that ship is because he was in the story in sin for defying God's purpose. Like, God told him a thing to do and he didn't do it. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing that the old guy, I forget his name, with the bullet wound or whatever, that's what he was saying, is that because of someone's sin or whatever it is, that's why the curse comes upon you.
Right. We need to talk about Mr. Holdfast and his biblical stuff.
Holdfast. Yeah.
So the question is then, was it really Hallam that is the Jonah, or maybe Jack is the Jonah? Maybe Jack did bring all of that on him with his hubris.
Then why did the wind pick back up? The wind picks up right at the end of the funeral, which is beautiful. Is it because he asked forgiveness from God?
It's because maybe it's
he
because
asked forgiveness from God. Wait, do you remember? He literally did.
And he refused to read the Jonah. Like, what Killam gave him was the Jonah section. And he refused to do that.
And he wouldn't do it. Instead, he said, and it was an amazing, beautiful quote, "The simple truth is, not all of us become the men we once hoped we might be. We failed him in respect to fellowship, and for that, we ask for your forgiveness and for his."
Shit. That's totally what it is.
That is what it is. God damn, that is so cool.
Oh my God.
I have goosebumps. That's amazing.
I love that so much.
That is amazing. Okay. I do need to read these books, because if that's kind of built in, this idea of like a bigger mythical world and the superstition aboard ships, I'm super into that too. Like, that's my high fantasy.
Oh, sweetie pie, I'm starting to think that there's really no way. I mean, again, we just spent a year and a half with Black Sails. I'm reading Moby Dick. I'm about to go into the seafaring period of Outlander.
Oh, yeah.
On this podcast.
Uh-huh.
People don't go to sea without bringing up this stuff. I mean, I'm just starting to believe
of course
that.
Not. It's rich in the tradition, especially the narrative tradition. But
exactly,
yes.
Sea voyages are metaphors. Sea voyages are where we go into the mythic realm.
Yes,
I love that. Okay, so yes. So basically, the story is then telling us that it is Jack's hubris.
Wow.
And again,
I love talking about stories with you, Daphne. You're the best.
Me too. I know, this is so much fun. No, but these two are units. So again, they're both wrong. Like, they both falter.
Yes,
let's say.
Yes, they both falter.
It is Jack. I think it's Jack's hubris that sparks it. That sparks the disharmony.
Yes,
and I agree with you that I think that Jack's choices maybe hit Stephen exactly in a place where he isn't as strong. So he does start arguing not from the place where he compliments Jack perfectly. Again, this is what disharmony is all about. It's not when you have a couple and there's disharmony, it's not one person is creating that. This is something that is disharmony. Okay.
Well, that makes the sacrifice that he makes later so much more meaningful. Because then it's not really about, well, I owe Jack a debt, when he puts down all of the lizards and all of the animals, and he says, just leave them and open the cages, and climbs on the back of somebody else, suffers such a humiliation to go and get Jack his vision. But it is because he sees where Jack was, he sees where Jack was right in the same place where Jack has come to see where Stephen was right.
Exactly.
Like, the two of them learned and they stepped towards one another.
Exactly. Each of them made a sacrifice. Jack made the sacrifice. He was staring at that ship. He was about to win it. And he says no. And he made the sacrifice for Stephen. And then and I love that Stephen's holding up that very beetle. The exact beetle, right?
Blakely.
That Blakely had brought him. The beetle that basically was the symbol of what Stephen had lost.
Yes.
When they decided not to go to the Galapagos. that Blakely brought him that beetle and that beetle symbolized it. And then it's the exact same beetle that he catches. He's looking for the bird. He's looking for his great white whale. He's looking for the thing that he wants more than anything. He wants to discover a species that doesn't exist. That's his greatest dream. He's like climbing up that hill to find that bird, but instead he catches that beetle, and when he's holding up the beetle, that's when he sees the Acheron. That's when he turns around. So they each did that thing where they had the thing in their hands, basically, and turned away from it for the sake of their friend, for the sake of the larger good, for the sake of the world in balance.
God, that's so good.
Oh my God, I love this movie a million times
It's
more now that we've talked
beautiful
about
movie.
it.
Also, just gorgeous to behold.
Yes. Right. We haven't even started to talk about that. I would love to talk about Blakely a little bit. I feel like we covered in this time of talking about Jack and Stephen. I feel like we've talked about a lot of the themes that I had written down as themes. I would like to talk about Blakely a little bit because I have a theory about Blakely, about where Blakely stands in this story.
Okay, yeah.
I find it fascinating that Blakely, I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. I really tried hard to remember. So Blakely and Calamy, they're the first two people to speak. Like we have quite a bit of story, of visuals before that. We have the whole kill him. Can I just say for a second? I love that man. I might have showed my hand about he's the steward. I love the steward with the long.
He's the Randall character.
He
reminded me of Randall.
The old dude is kind of the Randall character too.
Oh, the way you saw Randall, but not the way I saw Randall.
Yes, that's true. Okay, fair. I get it. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Again, that
Black
was
Sails.
Black Sails
Sorry.
reference.
Sorry.
Watch Black Sails. Listen to Fathoms Deep, and then you'll hear all of my crazy theorizing about a character named Randall.
Yes.
Yes. So I love that the two of them are the first to speak, which again, in storytelling world, like they're already telling us these two kids. Like you're introduced to these kids before you're introduced to the two adults. And they are the first two to talk to each other. And I was just like, whoa, okay, these two are important. And they are important. And I think that they are not a mirror of Jack and Stephen. What they are is that Calamy, like I said before, is being groomed to become Jack. But maybe less nuanced, right? Like he just wants to be Jack. Like he just wants to do what Jack does, but with less nuance. I think that Blakely's role in this is actually to be the synthesis of the two of them.
Oh, I like that very much.
So you see both of them after Blakely's injury, like after the first big battle, you see both of them having having these very heartfelt interactions with Blakely, but each from their own perspective, right? Like Jack brings him the Lord Nelson book, and Blakely's honestly intrigued by that. And
let me ask you something about the Lord Nelson book. I don't know if you noticed this, and I don't know enough about. I assume that Lord Nelson is a real historical figure.
I meant to look that up, and I didn't. I assumed the same.
Right. The picture had him with his arms crossed over his chest, which they often did. Did you notice that there was not a hand? Did he also lose an arm?
Oh, he might have.
That's which is just all the more thoughtful and wonderful. It could have just been a weird artistic choice because, art and things.
Again, sweetie,
there were a lot of tucked arms in that time. Hands are hard to draw.
That's true, but at the same time, this is a visual medium. So if it was there,
it's true. I'm sure it was purposeful.
Or even if not, if it's there, and even if it wasn't purposeful, it is there. So therefore, it is up for analysis.
Okay,
this is my approach.
Yep, I like your approach. Into it. Just looking up Lord Nelson really quick, just in case there's something really important. Lord Horatio Nelson.
Oh, now I'm dying to know if he lost a hand.
He was wounded several times in combat, losing the sight in one eye in Corsica and most of one arm.
Oh, shit. I love that. Oh, my God. Okay. I love Jack a million times more than I already did, and I loved him a whole lot.
I love Jack even more for that. Yeah, it was so thoughtful. And to see the kid's face just kind of light up.
Right.
And asked you served with him, didn't you? Yes, I did. Oh, what did you think of his story? Pass the salt.
Oh, I loved his story. Okay, yeah, we haven't even...
He's great at storytelling. We haven't talked about that.
We have not talked about his storytelling and his sense of humor. Okay, we'll just have to do... We're going to do that in the last section because that...
Okay, we can't just do this all night long. Yes, although we could.
Oh, shit, I love Jack now. Okay, but...
I know.
The thing I wanted to talk about, Blakely, is when he's later on, when they're talking about the stick bug and all of that. Mm-hmm. I know, I call it stick bug. I know there's a name for that. I'm sorry. I just call it stick bug. I just read.
Yes.
I love that when Stephen says to him, you could be a naturalist. And he said, I want to be a fighting naturalist.
Like you, sir. Yeah.
Like you, sir. But also,
that does mean it's the synthesis. Yes.
Right. That's what I'm saying is like, that was it. Like the minute I heard him say that, I was like, fighting naturalist.
Oh God, we do have to read these books.
If you wanted to make a ship name, I'm not going to say whether I ship Jack and Stephen, but if you wanted to, Fighting Naturalist would be pretty damn good.
Fighting Naturalist is a good fan fiction I would read. Yes, sure. Do you care for something a little more aggressive?
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, it's there. If y'all want to go back and watch the movie again.
No, it's there for interpretation. Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
Well, and I was saying to you earlier before we started recording that even if you don't think that there is anything sexual about their relationship whatsoever, it's still very romantic. It's a very capital R romantic in a literary sense relationship.
Right. Well, and in a thematic sense. I mean, in a mythological
sense too.
Right. In a mythological sense, like these two, when I joked about them being the world in balance, which is a term for those who haven't seen Black Sails, I really see them as that they really are that. And the world bends to their harmony or disharmony. And Fighting Naturalist, I just kind of love that as a concept. And so I feel like Blakely could be almost like the future that in a philosophical sense, the two of them need each other to balance each other, because again, Age of Reason, like this is not the beginning of the Age of Reason, obviously, but still, or even now, humanity is still having this constant conversation between the benefits of hierarchy and following leadership and the benefits of thinking for oneself and questioning authority. Mm-hmm. I feel like in a way, Blakely exists in this story to be the future. He's younger than them, and it's almost like he has these two fathers who are each inspiring him, that are each teaching him, and he shows such capability of both. It's not like, it'd be so easy to say, oh, well, he's like Stephen because he's so into the naturalism, but then you see that kid, he's in charge of the ship.
When he leads the charge and says they're going to sink us, he points the cannon down, he shoots off the cannon, and then he leads the charge, rapier brandished as he
and this
goes
was
across
after
the
they
plank
told
into the
him
other ship.
Right, and this is after he was not supposed to board the ship, because
but
of
he
his
knew
arm.
that tactically this is what has to be done. The ship will go down, we will go down with it.
Right.
That was, God, I was so proud. That was extraordinary.
So I almost think that, again, that there might be this kind of philosophical place where the two of them complement each other, the two of them and their world in balance, but that this child who's learning from both of them and inspired by both of them and so well cared for by both of them.
Yes.
That this child is, could actually in some way embody the world in balance in himself.
Right, and be the best of the two of them. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah,
that just really just warms my heart and inspired me a lot from this story. I really adore that. Okay, that's my... And he's so thoughtful too. And they're all thoughtful.
And compassionate. He was so considerate to Hallam and making everybody else back off. And I think that I wonder about, he seemed to have genuine and sincere friendship with Hallam too.
Yes.
It wasn't just that he felt sorry for him, which you see a lot.
Not at all.
Don't pick on him. It makes me, it's just wrong. He seemed to actually be friends with Hallam.
Right. Well, and that was in contrast to Calamy, who again, I love and I mourn his loss. And that was really hard because that kid is also awesome.
Yes. That kid was also awesome. Although my heart was just like, oh, thank God it's not Blakely, but yes.
And I don't think that's just the actors. I mean, I think that's also the story. Like, I think
That's
that
the story.
we
Yeah.
are supposed to feel like Calamity is awesome and surprisingly awesome. Like, when he does that, decoy ship, you're just like, damn, kid, look at
Yes.
you. But he's not the world in balance. Like, when Hullum is so afraid and everyone's doing that kind of like scary saluting of him and he runs away to the officer kids, it's Blakely who has compassion for him, and it's Calamity
Right.
who's just like, dude's just like shirking his duties again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so he's not the world in balance. He only
Right.
sees the one side.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Yeah, I found that very moving.
If there was a captain for me to follow into battle, it would be Blakely every time.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
I know, that little kid. And I also want to say, like, this is also something he learned from Jack. Like, if anything, between Jack and Stephen, the one that we see just doing the day-to-day recognition of the crew, like, I was really very moved by that about Jack. Like, yes, he orders them around. Yes, he inspires them. Yes, he will flog them, but he'll also thank them.
Mm-hmm.
He recognizes
And tell them job well done.
right every time. Like, even the guy who's like, oh, okay, well, the water, or maybe not even, like, that's a huge job to like keep the water from rising in the hull after the first attack. And he's like,
Yes.
okay, the water's here, but it's stable. And he's just
2
like,
foot 6 inches in holding.
right. And he's just like, good job. He's just everyone. He's just constantly,
Yes.
he will tell them what to do and he will recognize when they do it well. And that's a great
Yes.
leader.
I completely agree.
That's a truly great leader.
Yes. No, I love Captain Jack Aubrey. I think he's wonderful.
I do too. I mean, it's right. I mean, again, Steven's my guy.
No, sure. But if
I love
if
a
you
man
split
who'll get
those
excited.
two men up,
Right.
if you gave Stephen a ship and you gave Jack a ship and you told me, pick one, I'm following Jack.
That's true. I will definitely follow Jack on the ship, although Stephen getting excited about what he thinks are iguanas suddenly swimming, that's
Pretty
my
darling.
sweet spot.
No, that's cute. I'll tell you what I loved about Stephen that was surprising to me was just those complete badass moments that he had when he said, I'm going to do this by my own hand and pulled the bullet out of his own belly.
Oh, my God.
When he went
He's
10
strong.
miles across the island because he was in pursuit of his passion.
Yeah, he's a
And
strong
when he
man.
laid everything down and said that he was, that it was time to chase the Acheron, to put everything down, to set aside what he wanted for, again, the greater good. And I don't even know if you can call it the greater good, but for what had to be done, I
right.
suppose.
For what had to be done. Right.
Yeah, he's amazing. And then again, on the ship, when he's fighting alongside everyone and holding his own, it was wonderful. He's an
Yeah.
amazing character.
He is. No, again, wow. They're really, yes. And they're complex. I mean, that's,
Yes.
I get bored, as you know, by people who are like just good.
Yeah, it wasn't like Captain America and Hawkeye or anything. No,
Right.
this was a very special, very layered and complex relationship and 2 layered and complex characters.
Yep.
I agree.
Absolutely. All right. I think I'm ready to move on to, I have a few themes that I want to bring up.
Okay.
Now I'm fascinated where we're going to go with these themes.
Would you call me an aged man of war, Doctor? The Surprise is not old. She's a bluff bow, lovely lines. She's a fine seabird. Weatherly, stiff, and fast. Very fast if she's well handled.
All right. So we covered 2 of the 4 themes that I brought up. I'm really excited, which 2 of them were the Jonah and also the Albatross. I would like to talk about Holdfast. I loved this.
Is that your new tattoo idea? Would support.
No, but you know who had the tattoo Holdfast on his hands from Black Sails? Gates.
No, I don't remember. Gates did.
Gates had Holdfast on his fingers,
Wow. That's so
just
good.
like that character.
Wow, very cool.
I
God,
know.
I love Gates.
So, yeah, I'm fascinated with this concept of Holdfast. I mean, this is obviously more than just like random tattoo because it comes up a few times. And I was trying to figure out where I think it falls in this, this kind of dichotomy of tradition and hierarchy versus not. I mean, I think it falls with the tradition and hierarchy. I think that's the role of the old dude, which I know he has a name, but I didn't write down his name because I just kept calling him old dude.
That's fine.
But he's kind of fascinating because hold fast has a few different meanings. Like this, so this was a tattoo that people who worked in the rigging would have.
Oh, okay.
Because of the idea that it actually, I read that it actually came from a saying in Dutch, which actually meant to stop, I believe. But that it became a thing that people would tattoo on themselves as an idea of basically holding on tight, like the idea of like hold on tight, because as you see in this and any story about tall ships and once upon a time sailing, you fall off the ship and you're kind of done for.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's the end of your life. Mm-hmm.
So but I also love it as a concept, like in this story, because it almost feels like it's used to support people. Like, hold on, you'll be okay. But it also
like hold steady, hold
right.
fast,
But I really feel like ultimately it is a symbol of the traditions of the unwavering adherence to the sailing traditions and hierarchy. And so it makes so much sense that the character who has that tattooed on him is actually the one who really kind of rallies subtly, but rallies the people against Hollum.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, he's the guy that had this totally crazy surgery done on his head.
Yeah. God,
right? So it's really, I feel like I haven't quite parsed. So I was hoping maybe that you would have some insights about this. Like, this is a guy who basically was saved. Like he was wounded. He was unable to speak. And then it's Stephen who with this way more revolutionary than what it seemed like is capable in that period of time, surgery, fixes him.
But true physician.
Right. But then fixes him in order so that he can start speaking and turning the crew against Hollum.
So kind of creates a bit of a monster. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah,
really
I don't know. I don't know if there's anything there. I mean, there is because you saw it, I suppose. It didn't occur to me.
Right. I don't know what to make of that. So I don't know what to say about it. I was very moved by the tattoo and its kind of tie to the tradition of sailing.
Yeah.
But yeah, if any listeners have a lot of insight about that, please email, because I would really, really, really enjoy hearing other people's theories about that, because I didn't quite get there. But the main theme that I really love is the idea of the ship is home. And I really enjoyed that. And that's
England.
Right. Well, for me, mostly home. Like, the ship is England is fine. The ship is home.
See, that's the part
personally.
that speaks to duty and honor.
Sure.
Yes.
But the part that moved me personally was ship is home, is that our first introduction to the ship is very quiet, that we see all these details of the life there, that we see, just the little things about how they live and the animals. There are goats. There was a goat.
There was a goat, yes.
For the black
that had a
salespeople.
name even, yes.
But I really adore that. And I think that's part of why I love Killam. Maybe I couldn't show my hand. Like, Killam's actually my favorite part. I love him so much. I love him so much.
See, this is the thing that's fascinating to me about us. I've learned from Black Sails too, is that the things that really crack you up and you find the most funny are the things that I tend to just roll my eyes about. So, which is weird because we make each other laugh all the time. But on the show, I'm like, yeah, tits, fruit. Okay, sure.
Okay, I never claimed that was my favorite thing, but I do like it a whole lot.
Maybe not favorite, but you thought it was really funny, and I was eye rolling.
I do think that's
I
funny.
eye roll a lot for Killam, but yes.
Oh no, I love Killam.
I love the lesser of two evils joke.
Yes, the lesser of two evils is amazing.
Was amazing. The thing I love about that joke is the delivery. I love that that Jack is already cracking up at the brilliance of his own joke, and he's a little bit in his cups. He's just a little bit drunk. He's poking fun a little bit at his friend. I love that whole delivery. It's hysterical.
Oh, see, and part of what I love about it is that he is... See, I see it, again, with the dinners having each part of their progress. Like, he says it right after Stephen had said the whole thing about basically saying, talking about Nelson and about power corrupting.
Sure. So just kind of making like a war and lesser of two evils joke. Yeah. No,
Right.
That's true.
Right. Well, he was a little bit, catching his friend off guard, showing his friend that he is the outsider. Clearly, everyone at that table was ready for that joke except for Stephen because he's so earnest and such a scientist. So
That's true. Everybody saw it coming but him, didn't they? Oh,
yeah,
God,
they
that's
did.
funny.
No, and I love
So they really were laughing at his expense.
Oh, they were
that's cute.
totally laughing at his expense. And it was right after he had a little bit disrespected his friend's very earnest talking about this great leader, which again is something
Right.
that Stephen is not going to really respect in the same way. So I feel like that was
You're very right.
hilarious for itself.
Right. It was hilarious. Yes.
And again, yeah, and that is okay. I can't pick a favorite thing. I was going to have us each pick favorite things. There's just no way. I mean, I love Killam. Can I just say? Wait, I didn't say my Killam stuff.
You said, can I just say? Drink.
Yeah. This is why we named the podcast this. When we get excited, we're likely to say this. Killam, always ready with coffee. He just constantly, there's just like, they're doing anything. There's just those little adorable cups of coffee. I appreciate this.
They were great china, too.
Yes.
I do appreciate those sorts of things.
Yes. Also, when Jack wanted to explain something nautical, oh my God, I haven't even said my favorite line yet. When Jack said his something, when he said his something and he was trying to explain something nautical to Stephen and he was about to start drawing on the tablecloth and Killam's like, not the tablecloth. I love that Killam is this kind of like this shaggy weird dude who's 100% in charge of like keeping some level of decorum.
Yes, which is so important on board a ship.
Right.
I think. Yes.
That's part of the hierarchy.
To remind people.
He's serving the hierarchy in his own way. And like even Jack is just totally dismissive of him most of the time. He does thank him for the coffee. But like most of the time he's just like Jack's
Well,
not...
he's always bickering about them playing the music, which is so weird because the music is like the most civilized thing that they do.
I love that too.
It's very strange.
But then again, that's that whole class division. He's like, they're like music you can't even dance to. Right?
Oh,
and then
you're
you
right.
get
You're absolutely right.
And then you get the music on the deck of the crew where someone does start dancing to, right? It's just
it's so good. There's so much there.
I know. Shit, we could just like talk for another 2 hours about this, but we need not to.
We need not to. It's true.
All right. We do love Jack's humor. I guess actually I'm going to change my favorite thing, even though I got to talk about Killam. I'm cheating, but I'm going to talk about my favorite thing after you tell me what your favorite thing is. But then I will say what my favorite thing is.
My favorite thing is Jack and Stephen playing music together.
That's a good favorite thing.
Every time it happens, I'm just filled with joy.
My favorite part is a line that I already tweeted because I love it so much. But I love the moment where Stephen says, clearly something terribly fascinating and nautical just happened and I'm at a loss.
Yes, we turn north.
I love that so much. And I know it took me a while to figure out what happened that he's responding to. And I just love that partly because it totally shows the brilliant outsider that he is, that he's both brilliant and an outsider, but also as a person who's been podcasting about stories involving tall ships for a good long time now.
Yes.
Who never
Is
really
he kind
cared.
of your avatar.
Kind of. It's just like, as I like never knew about ships, never really cared about ships. Now I know quite a bit about ships, and yet still hilariously talking about stories where ships are really important and not really getting it. But I love that.
Yes.
I love it.
Oh, that's
very,
good.
very
How
much.
fun.
Yes. So yes, I think that's my favorite thing. I don't know. It's hard. I have a lot of, because Killam also. I'm just gonna throw Killam back in there. I really like him.
He was I recognized as I was watching this.
You're like,
he's going to love this guy. He's not doing anything for me, but Daphne's going to love this guy.
He's like just cranky in a way that really gives me joy.
I love one of the times that Stephen holds up the mirror where he says, Jack, you're the predator.
Oh, right. We didn't talk about that. I do
really
love that
good.
too. I know. I love that too.
When they're in the tent and Stephen is performing the surgery on himself, and he asks Jack, "Are you all right?"
Right. I know.
As he's performing surgery on himself.
I know.
He asked Jack,
I know. They're
"Are
beautiful.
you all right?"
They're beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Yep.
Am I speaking to my old friend or to the ship's captain?
Oh, God, I know. That whole conversation.
We talked about that thematically, but
Right.
it was perfectly encapsulated in that sentence.
Yep.
When they cut the mast loose and there's the celebration below decks and the grief above decks.
Yes.
Beautiful.
I
To
know.
wives and to sweethearts.
I know.
May they never meet.
Oh, my God. I know. Jack's line about the ship that's like sounds super sexual. When Stephen called it an old man of war, and he says,
"Oh yes, sure."
And he says, "Would you call me an aged man of war, Doctor?" And then when talking about the Surprise, he says, "She has a bluff bow, lovely lines, weatherly shift, and fast."
Yeah, that's pretty sexy talk. That would work for me. Come here, Captain. Yeah, no, that's good. And then there was one more. Oh, right after the storm, they're making all these repairs to the boat and just trying to get her seaworthy again.
Right, and they're fixing the figurehead.
The figurehead. Yes.
That was supposed to go in my
Yes.
theme about home, is that it is their home, so the figurehead is just as
It's
important
so
to them.
important. I loved that. That was very meaningful to
I
me.
love that too.
And it's also the one symbol of femininity on the ship.
I know.
The one symbol of womanhood on the ship.
I know,
I
shit.
appreciated that too.
That's totally true. And that actually segues beautifully into us talking about the next few episodes of Can I Just Say?
Okay, excellent.
Part of me knows why we did this, why we talked about this movie, because it's so clear to me why you love it, even more clear to me now. I actually love it more now than I did coming into this conversation. And
That's wonderful.
And I loved it a whole lot coming into the conversation. So that's
Excellent.
this is how podcasting should work, is that we should both
Yes.
walk away loving the thing more than we did before we started talking to
It's
each
how
other.
friendship should work, and
Yes,
enthusiasm and
that's-
shared joy. Shared
This
joy
is
is
true.
double joy.
This is true. But part of me, knowing you and me, is amused that our first episode of our new podcast was about a movie in which there are no women.
Wow, yes.
Yeah, so I'm very amused by that. And so I wanted to tell the listeners what we're going to be doing upcoming. So this is our first episode. Right now we're in a really interesting place in our podcast. Our baby podcast is that we will be alternating between episodes between you and me, Elizabeth,
Right.
and episodes where I will have the first two of our guests, which is Alistair Stevens and Lauren Sarner, will be talking with me about Outlander. So I'm
Better than me.
super amused by this, because our next thing that you and I are going to talk about in a month is Elizabeth. We will be talking about a movie where a woman is running the show,
Yes.
and also dealing with some of the challenges of being a woman who's running the show. So we're about to have you and I are going to have a conversation that's like full on about women in power
Yes,
and women in
especially
society.
in a man's space. Yes. Culturally, what is known as a man's space. Yes.
Exactly.
That's going to be wonderful. And that'll be a new movie for me, because I've started to watch it once before. And I love period dramas, but I like my period dramas to look a little clean and washed up, and, like they could also be a deodorant commercial.
Yes.
And
I love
this
political
one was
intrigue.
I
love
so
political
this one looked
intrigue.
grim for me. I started it and I was like, this isn't really what I'm going for. And so I just backed right out again. But I'm very excited to look at it again and to talk about it with you.
Yeah, I think that in this point in your life, this movie is going to mean a lot to you, because for me, this movie is a lot about women finding their voice.
Yes.
And the challenges of that as well. Not just like, so this is a movie about a woman in transformation, in which she's navigating both the power but also the constraints
Yes.
and the tension between the two of those. This is one of my favorite movies. I mean, we're
Wow.
about to
Wow.
we're about to talk about one of my favorite stories in the world, and I'm really looking forward to it. So that'll be a few weeks from now. In the meantime, we will have an episode about podcast episode about episodes 1 through 3 of Outlander. I just wanted to say to everyone, I have actually gotten screeners. Don't hate me. What I want to tell you about that is that this season looks amazing. Season 3 of Outlander is really making me so happy that I decided that we need to talk about Outlander because I am so excited to talk about it.
Good. I know how important that story is to you, and I'm
It
so
is.
glad that
It
it's
is
being treated with the respect that you want it to.
It
be.
is. That's not always been my experience with the show. I've had very high highs and very low lows with the show, and my experience with season 3 so far is that it is killing it, and I'm
Wonderful.
so excited.
Good.
So
Good.
that's what's coming
I will watch
up.
along and listen.
Excellent. So yes, thank you for joining us for our first episode. This has been so much fun.
It has. Thank you. And again, if you enjoyed this episode, if you like listening to us, if you like what we have to say, please leave a review for us on iTunes. It really makes a huge difference, especially in the beginning. Right.
And this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about so many stories that we're excited about. And sometimes the two of us, sometimes with guests, sometimes the two of us and guests. And it's just going to be a whole lot of fun. We're so happy that you all have come to join us.
Yes. Thanks again for listening. I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive. Can I Just Say podcast is a Common Room Radio production. For more information and our other shows, visit commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can make a big difference. Visit patreon.com/commonroomradio to pledge support and access bonus features that are just for patrons. And join the conversation by using the hashtag #CanIJustSay and follow us on Twitter @JustSayPodcast. We request that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and you can always email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com. Thanks for listening.